и при угрозе территориальной целостности нашей страны, для защиты России и нашего народа мы, безусловно, используем все имеющиеся в нашем распоряжении средства. Это не блеф.
Russia could be ready to use military force against NATO within 5 years. 5 years.
It's been 80 years since the guns fell silent over Europe. Adolf Hitler and Mussolini had been defeated, their dreams of empire shattered. Bold new alliances and international institutions were established to prevent anything like this existential conflict ever happening again. But now, the drums of war are beating once again.
Russia has teamed up with China, North Korea and Iran. They are expanding their militaries and their capabilities. Putin's war machine is speeding up, not slowing down.
War experts have echoed NATO's concerns, explaining what could possibly unfold across the world.
I think it's also quite likely that Putin will want to coordinate his actions with China's Xi Jinping in regards to Taiwan. So the two would want to move together simultaneously, Russia against NATO's eastern frontier and Xi against Taiwan.
I think that, yes, countries that were under the Soviet Union do feel quite a lot of antagonism towards Russia, do feel that Russia poses a clear and present threat, do feel that there might be a possibility in future that Putin might want to even invade their countries or take over their countries in the way that he's doing in Ukraine.
I think we need to learn from history. We look at today, look at the parallels of today with the late 1930s. I think they're very clear. You know, we've been through this once before, so we should learn from history, otherwise we're doomed to repeat the mistakes of history. And I think that we have, to a degree, repeated those mistakes in past few years of trying to accommodate Putin.
So how real is this threat? Is it just another clash of polarized political egos? Is it a strongman trying to convince his people that he's tough? Or does the ambition and ability actually exist to embrace Europe in an empire once again?
Russia is reconstituting its forces with Chinese technology and producing more weapons faster than we thought. In terms of ammunition, Russia produces in 3 months what the whole of NATO produces in a year. And its defense industrial base is expected to roll out 1,500 tanks, 3,000 armored vehicles, and 200 Iskander missiles this year alone.
When we talk about a Russian attack on NATO, we need to be clear that we're not talking about the same thing as the old Soviet Union invading or the Warsaw Pact invading NATO. We are talking about a much more limited scenario, with Putin's goal being to dictate the terms of NATO's capitulation in Eastern and Central Europe, rather than a full-scale invasion of NATO all the way to the English Channel. It's a much more directed scenario, probably against one of the Baltic states, and the goal would be to shatter NATO unity and resolve such that NATO falls apart, and then Russia can move more leisurely to take territory as it sees fit.
However, the reality of Russia's war machine has been unveiled since invading Ukraine in 2022, as they've struggled to gather ground against the much smaller state after several years of fighting.
Russia has really shown their hand in terms of their strengths and their weaknesses in their military capability, because Russia and President Putin genuinely have thrown everything that they've got at the war in Ukraine. I would say that actually, because of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russia has become degraded militarily. They've thrown a lot of their personnel and capability into the war with Ukraine, which is still ongoing, and Europe has actually uplifted their capability, making it much less likely that there would be a direct confrontation between Russia and NATO member countries.
All the indications are that Putin is not interested in peace at all. And so really the question then does come down to, does Trump follow through with his earlier threat of walking away, or does he double down and start supporting Ukraine with greater military assistance? If Trump does back away, abandoning Ukraine, and all Ukraine then has left is what support it can get from Europe and its own defense industrial capacity, then chances are Russia will make faster gains and eventually achieve some sort of victory. At that point, Russia would then be in a position to regroup and rearm and then pivot and attack NATO's eastern frontier.
Deterrence is a word often thrown around by politicians, but Europe is now experiencing its true meaning. Can NATO prepare well enough, fast enough, to convince Putin that any attack will put him in more danger than it is worth? And could Europe stand alone if America decides it's had enough?
I mean, I'm a little weary hearing our allies talk about, oh my God, if the Americans leave, what will we do? Well, what you should do is recognize that there's a threat, talk to your populations as if they are adults, and explain why it's essential that Europe is prepared to defend itself.
I think that the possibility of war between NATO and Russia is very real and is probably increasing. I think you also need to factor in Russia's willingness to make nuclear threats and brandish nuclear weapons against NATO, and would that be a means for Putin to intimidate and coerce NATO into backing down? And he may even be prepared to go further and actually do a demonstration strike, a nuke detonated over the Baltic Sea, just to drive the message home to NATO that, yes, I'm serious, I would use nuclear weapons.
So what we're much more likely to see than a direct military confrontation between Russia and NATO member countries is a continuation of this kind of grey zone warfare that is currently clear and present and ongoing. So we're talking about things like attacks on key infrastructure or cyber attacks or even espionage.
Putin coordinating with Xi, Russia and China, Iran and North Korea working together. We do face an axis of authoritarian states that is determined to overturn the established rules-based international order and is determined to end the dominance of liberal democracy as a system of governance and replace it with an authoritarian world order. We're in that fight. It's a Cold War fight. It's a hybrid war fight in the grey zone. The question is, will it become a kinetic fight in the sense of a true traditional war? I think it's quite possible.